fear for many of us about slowing down. There's a part of the book where I talk about having the courage to stop. And I think because of often the way that we've been used to operating in our society is that it is productivity driven. You are what you do. You are what you get done. You are all the accolades and the things that we accomplish. And I feel like in the last 5 years, many of us have had to question, is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there another me in here that is wanting to have life? Another me in here that actually doesn't want what my grandmother wants, or my father wants, or my mother wants, or my parents want, and I know that this is a very provocative conversation for some people because their identity has been rooted in following the plan. There is a blueprint that's been set for me, and my job is to follow the plan. And anytime I experience anything in my body or my mind or my spirit that challenges that plan, I may not have the courage to listen. I may not have the courage to slow down. This is not about saying that people are lazy. This is not about saying that people are liars. This is not about saying even that people are scaredy cats. This is about acknowledging that we do live in a culture that encourages us to drive.
Yeah.
So there can't be any mistake about why we're driving and why we're driving as hard as we're driving.
Welcome. The US has always been this land where reaching for ambition has not only been encouraged, it's been profoundly celebrated. However, what if your ambition isn't a sign of just strength, but a symptom of unmet needs and maybe even wounds? Well, that's where we're about to go. Welcome to the Dov Baron Show. Come for the stories, stay for the learning. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I advise high-performing leaders, organizations, how to harness their emotional source code to profoundly transform their tribe. Today on the Dov Baron Show, our guest is Rha Goddess. She is the entrepreneurial soul coach behind some of today's most powerful cultural architects and social entrepreneurs. She's worked with Google, Girls Who Code, the Ford Foundation, and founders who are really disrupting every old model that we've kind of inherited. She's not only shaping businesses, she's reshaping the soul of success itself. Her mission is to revolutionize the way we work, the way we live, and the way we play, and of course, how we handle our business. From the onset of her more than 30 years career as a cultural innovator, social impact strategist, and creative change agent, Rha has drawn on the power of creativity, culture, community to move hearts, minds, and policy. In 2011, she founded Move the Crowd. This is a social entrepreneurial training company working at the intersection of values, profit, and social impact. Rha has leveraged her transformative approach to empower individuals, to empower teams and organizations like Google, Lululemon, Delta, Fidelity, KBL Eisner, Girls Who Code, and the Nathan Cummings Foundation, and many, many more. She's been featured in Time Magazine, Miss Magazine, Variety, Essence, Redbook, Forbes, Fast Company, CNBC, Fortune, the Chicago Tribune, and a whole bunch more before we even get into it. More on that in a moment. You're tuned into the Dov Baron Show. Our show is an exploration into the minds that shape the world. Every episode is a raw, unscripted collaboration between my guests and myself as we dive into the truths that few really dare to ask. We find guest viewers sometimes quite unknown to the general public, but absolute titans in their field. The kinds of people that high-profile leaders turn to when they need an edge. If you're the kind of leader who craves depth over soundbite, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is where deep thinkers come to sharpen their edge. For the next 2 episodes, we're in a profound conversation with Rha Goddess about many things, including her latest book, Intentional Ambition. Think about that. Intentional Ambition, in which Rha calls out the lies that we've been sold about work, wealth, and worth, because she knows exactly what it costs to build an empire out of survival. Lean in, because this conversation might just be the moment where you finally get to drop the mask and reclaim your own authentic story. Please turn up the volume and help me to welcome author of Intentional Ambition, Rha Goddess. Welcome, Rha.
Hi, Dov. Thank you so much for having me. It's my joy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to have you on. And I'm really excited about this subject because I've written lots about this. I speak about this thing, and I know this is a common ground between the two of us. As you know, your beloved husband and I are good friends, and I know that your schedule on this new book has been kind of crazy getting out there. Are you sick of talking about it yet?
But great question.
I've had books out. It's like, whew, you're asking me about that. I wrote it 5 years ago. Okay, let me see if I can remember. So you're still caught in the whirlwind of that. I've written extensively on people like Elon Musk and other very successful people who I believe are people who are driven by their wounds. In your new book, you discuss the distinction between wounded ambition, this is really great, and intentional ambition. But what does healing ambition look like in the body? How does someone actually feel when their ambition is shifted from being fear or wound-based to truth?
I think the first thing that you notice is energetically you feel different. And we don't talk enough about this stuff, but when we're out of alignment or out of whack, there's an energy suck that absolutely occurs. I think about that kinesthetic exercise that Dr. Wayne Dyer used to do, God bless him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, where he'd hold your arm out and he'd press your arm down and he would invite you to say something that was in your truth. And he'd press your arm and you could feel the strength. And then he would invite you to say something that was false.
Right.
And he could easily press your arm down. And one of the things that I've been saying to my beloved leaders and in the context of talking about this book is that your energy doesn't lie. Your mind will play all kinds of tricks, but your energy doesn't lie. And so this is now really an internal game and an opportunity for us to become more connected to what happens in our energy when we're operating from a place that feels authentic and real to us versus when we're operating from a place of proving, we're operating from a place of defending, we're operating from a place of delivering on someone else's agenda for us, someone else's vision for us. And I think we're at a place now where people are really ready to have the conversation about how to reconcile that and transform that.
You brought up something there that's important for us to address directly, which is this woo-woo term, which is energy. Because we're not going to be testing our own arms like we're at Wayne Dyer. When you can feel it in your energy, becomes kind of vague for people. And like, yeah, I know when I'm in my truth and when I'm not, but I'm more aware than a lot of people are. And a lot of people don't even know that their ambition isn't intrinsic. It isn't soulful. They don't even recognize that. So what I'm asking is, how does somebody recognize it in themselves without going over to the naturopath or the healer or somebody else to say, hey, you know, is something off? How did they get to it themselves? Because as I said, I think people are unconsciously driven to heal something, but they don't know what it is.
Yeah, your happiness. And this also, in many ways, can be challenging in the sense that a lot of us haven't even considered that our happiness is important, particularly when it comes to our work. What's important is making money. What's important is having influence. What's important is power in the ways that we traditionally understand power. But I think this question of, are you happy? Are you fulfilled? And as much as the conversation of energy perhaps could seem to some to be distant, we know what our well-being feels like. We know when we feel good and we know when we feel lousy. If we come into our gastrointestinal tract, if we come into our blood pressure, if we come into all the things that our doctor is chasing us about, if we come into, for many of us, finally, we're able to talk about mental health in a way that is very honest and authentic and transparent. If we come into those aspects of our expression, they will also tell us what's happening in terms of where we are in relationship to where we want to be.
So, of course, the title of the book is Intentional Ambition, which suggests the opposite. We're unintentionally ambitious. And what I mean by that is not that we're thoughtless, but that we don't understand what's driving that ambition. I want you to talk to that a little bit because, as I said, I've written a lot about it, and I think that it's one of those things that I can't write enough about, not because I'm excited to write about it, although I am, but because sometimes I can write 1,600 words on it and it still doesn't land. And then I write another one that's 200 words on it and it still doesn't land. I'm like trying to shrink it down. And it's like, how do we get people to recognize their unintentional or their unconscious ambition?
For me, it came at the expense of my well-being. My joke is that I quit before the pandemic. So in 2017, I was coming off of the heels of the death of my father. My father was everything to me. Incredible, hardworking man, born in the 1920s, survived over 2 decades of Jim Crow segregation. I was caring for him, my sister and I, in a way where we were just burning the candle at all ends. Navigating the healthcare system, moving from a place of wanting to make sure that he got the best care possible to wanting to make sure that he could die with dignity. And for many of my caretakers out there and people who've been in the position of having to care for someone and be responsible for someone, and particularly I think about our sandwich generation, right? If you've got parents and you've got children, what that means in terms of the ways in which you get stretched.
Yes.
And when he finally passed away, rather than grieving, I just threw myself into my company. My company was growing at the time. We were still relatively new. And there was lots for me that I could do. And I just kept kind of piling it on and piling it on and piling it on. And all came to a head for me in the summer of 2017, interestingly enough, through a rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I had a very diverse team at the time, and the Unite the Right rally that ultimately became violent. And one of the members of my team actually was from Charlottesville and lived on the very street in which Heather Henley was mowed down. And there began to be this discourse with her and another member of the team. And their tension ultimately erupted and really fractured the team. And so August 12th, we had this horrible, horrific blowout of violence in the streets. By September 10th, one side of my team not talking to the other side of the team. And by October 10th, I couldn't get off the couch, no matter what I tried. I looked at my husband and I said, I'm not okay. And that was big to admit because as many of us come from backgrounds where never let him see you sweat. You're always on. And no matter what's happening in your personal life, you're always putting a face on it.
Right.
And I couldn't do it anymore. And as I went into therapy and the support of a really amazing coach, I began to understand what was driving my ambition and begin to unpack a lot of the messages and the narratives that had been rooted or embedded at the core of the way in which I was pushing myself. Everything from my mother's sort of Southern Baptist perfectionism. This quest for perfectionism is a response to growing up in the South and in the 20s and 30s. My father's unfinished business as a Black man in America, to survivor's guilt because I was someone in a family where many of the members of my family, a close family, had mental health diagnoses that they were navigating. And all of that kind of converged into this belief that rest was a luxury, that stopping was something I could not afford to do, that it was necessary because these legacies or this pressure. And when I talk to many leaders, whether it's a cultural lineage that we've experienced, whether it's being indoctrinated into environments where we're taught that you have to work harder in order to be half as recognized, or there's all these narratives and stories that are often fueling the way that we push ourselves. And it was my meltdown that actually gave me the permission to begin to challenge it.
So up until that point, obviously you were very driven. You were very ambitious. You'd been very successful. You'd started things, you'd grown things, you'd helped others. I fell off a mountain and people go, it must have changed your life. And I'm always, no, it didn't. It's not the moment. It's always in the aftermath. So you talked about your dad had died. That was the moment. But it's the aftermath. It's something else that catalyzes the change. And my question to you is, before the moment when your dad passed and you'd been burning the candle at every end, was there ever a moment before that where you were like, am I on this or what? I'm doing well. It's good. I'm checking all the boxes. I've got all the right ambitions to be a good spiritual person, a good profitable person, a good business person, a good coach, a good whatever it is. Was there ever a moment prior to that where you went, you're something a bit off?
Yeah. I mean, definitely it was building. As with all great things, hindsight is 2020. But certainly I could see in the process of beginning to really repair and restore all of the years of that pushing and forcing and pressing in ways that were deeply unhealthy. I could see that it had been building, and I could see the rationale. In other words, what were the stories that I was telling myself that kept enabling me to step over the signs? And I say this all the time, is whether you want to call it God, the universe, life, whatever you want to call it, it comes the first time and it lightly taps you on the shoulder with the wisdom, right? And then it builds, and then it grows, and then the tap gets harder, and then, and then it becomes a kick.
Oh, I definitely know what you mean.
This is the conversation of how we wind up in rock bottom. And of course, we all know that before we get to the floor, there are all kinds of signs on the way down.
Yeah, I've spoken many times about it. Everybody knows about my big fall, which was 120 feet while free climbing. But that was my fourth physical fall. I fell 3 times before and just got up and went, I'm fine. I was battered, but I'm fine. I have to say mine was a literal physical fall, but often it's the death of a loved one, like in your case, or it's a bankruptcy or a divorce or a diagnosis, your own or somebody else you love, or some kind of anything else. And the question is, will you pay attention? That's why I was asking you that, because I think it's very easy for people to be listening to this and go, well, nothing like that's happened to me. My parents are still good. My family's still good. I'm not falling off a mountain. I don't do any stupid stuff. So I'm good. I'm on the right path. And I'm like, I just want to have you pay attention to things you're not noticing, because you don't have to fall off a mountain. You could simply twist your ankle and pause and go, okay, what if this is a signal that I've set up for myself? You don't have to believe in a God or a universe or any of that. But just like, what if my unconscious mind is trying to say, maybe you should just take a pause.
Yeah.
And in that pause is the questioning, and this is why I love your book and what it's about, is the question of what's driving me. The term you have, of course, is intentional ambition, but what's driving me? Because most of what's driving people seems to be, I know from my work and from your work, very unintentional.
Yes.
And by that, I don't mean accidental. I mean, we don't bring it. And I've heard people say, I'm just a driven individual. I used to say that in my 20s. I'm just a driven person. And it's like, yeah, really? Are you sure about that? Is that actually what it is?
Yeah.
And I know you go into it in the book. How do we get people to get to that place of being able to question that unconscious ambition, that drive, that I'm just a driven person, that identity statement that lacks truth? It holds a lot of identity, but it doesn't necessarily hold a lot of truth.
I mean, I think that's the part, is what is the identity that we're living into? And who do we want to be? And who do we think we are? And the reason for me why I wrote this book was because I recognized that over the last 5 years, on some level, every single one of us have had to ask some big questions because of the nature of what we've been through as a global community. And so whether your pandemic was retreat-like or whether your pandemic was what broke loose, we were forced to stop, and we were forced to look, and we were forced to question.
Yes.
And I think if we're honest with ourselves, and that's a practice, I think what you're driving at is some of us don't have a lot of practice in being honest with ourselves.
And it's important to just pause there and say, we don't have a lot of practice being honest with ourselves, but we're not consciously lying to ourselves. And that's a really important distinction. So Rha's not saying to you, oh, you're just lying to yourself. That's false. It's that you've not paused to actually ask the question.
And I think there's a fear for many of us about slowing down. There's a part of the book where I talk about having the courage to stop. And I think because of often the way that we've been used to operating in our society is that it is productivity driven. You are what you do. You are what you get done. You are all the accolades and the things that we accomplish. And I feel like in the last 5 years, many of us have had to question, is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there another me in here that is wanting to have life? Another me in here that actually doesn't want what my grandmother wants, or my father wants, or my mother wants, or my parents want, and I know that this is a very provocative conversation for some people because their identity has been rooted in following the plan. There is a blueprint that's been set for me, and my job is to follow the plan. And anytime I experience anything in my body or my mind or my spirit that challenges that plan, I may not have the courage to listen. I may not have the courage to slow down. This is not about saying that people are lazy. This is not about saying that people are liars. This is not about saying even that people are scaredy cats. This is about acknowledging that we do live in a culture that encourages us to drive.
Yeah.
So there can't be any mistake about why we're driving and why we're driving as hard as we're driving.
Yeah. Towards the end of the pandemic, you could see people were going to be out again. And I did some videos about that. I was really concerned that things were going to go back to normal. The last thing you need is normal, because normal has been very dysfunctional. And I called the pandemic the great pause, because it gave us all pause to get off the treadmill and go, why am I doing this? And some people quit their jobs, or they started working from home, or they moved out of the busy city, or they got enough pause to question. But most people went right back on the treadmill and did the thing that they were doing before. And again, it's like falling off the mountain or your dad dying. It's like you had the opportunity. Now, what do you need? And so what I'm asking you for, Rha, in the context of the listener is, okay, we all had that pause. We all had that shove off the mountain called the pandemic. We all maybe got some realization out of it to some degree. But in many ways, we're worse than before. And what I mean by that is the ambitions come back, okay, which is not necessarily intentional. And on top of that, we've lost a lot of our social circles because we know people are far less sociable than they were pre-pandemic. As I was talking about with Corey, the bowling club has gone, the bridge club has gone, all those little social groups you used to have, and now online. And there's a very good friend of mine who's a Southern Baptist and goes to the oldest Southern Baptist church in Georgia. Her friend had called her and said, why haven't we seen you at church? And she goes, I'm there every week. And she goes, I've never seen you. Why are you not there? And she goes, because I go online. And she goes, stop it. Come to the church. And she went to the church, and then she showed me a video. She was talking to her kid, and she went, I'm an idiot. I missed out. I realized we choose to work more and be convenient. That's why we buy shit from Amazon as opposed to getting in your car and driving 5 minutes. It's convenient. Is it cheaper? No, but it's convenient. Can I have it now? I don't have to look for parking? Sure. Okay. And this is the challenge. How do we bring people back to that sense to sort of pause and ask those questions? That's the driving question here. How do we get people to stop and say, what is my unintentional ambition?
Yeah.
Versus my intentional ambition?
Yeah. I think we are discovering, because I hear what you're saying, Dov, we're discovering that there's a cost to the lack of human connection.
Absolutely.
And as much as we may appreciate the convenience of remote, which we do.
Of course.
Raise my hand.
Right now.
100%, right? What we also recognize is that our inability to be able to connect with others and to be able to connect in ways that feel authentic and real for us do take a toll. And we're seeing it now with the science, where they're talking about the rapid growth in anxiety, even the decrease in life expectancy. And when we talk about the blue zones and all kinds of data and science out here that is starting to really articulate the understanding that community, having a sense of connection, in your words, having a sense of belonging, is paramount. to our health and well-being. And so as much as we've gone back to a lot of things, they don't feel the same because we are not the same. And the more that we can start to recognize and understand that we're not the same, the more we get to start to ask those more thoughtful and intentional questions about what has shifted and what is different. And so some of the things I'm hearing that are different for us, one is there are ways in which we have been humanized. Now, if we think about over the course of the pandemic, more than 6 million people left their bodies. I'm hearing even to the numbers of 25% of the population still walking around with long COVID 3 or 4 years later. The other thing that has happened for people is they're recognizing that their health and well-being is important. And their health and well-being isn't just eating healthier and getting out in nature, though that is critical to it. Their health and well-being has to do with addressing where they are moving or operating in alignment with their values and what they say is important to them and what they say matters to them. So this quality of life and quality of experience is also now something that people are paying more attention to.
But are they? That's my question to you. Are they? I know you and I want to say, yes, they are. But honestly, I got to be honest, because you and I work in the same sort of framework, is that the ones who are, but the majority aren't, in my opinion. The majority are still ignoring that and doing the unintentional ambition, trying for the next goal, the next thing on that list that will get them to feel like, I've got the accolade. And it's a brass ring, because when you grab it, it's going to move away and it's never going to feel as full. This is why I keep coming back to this question. How do we get people to wake up?
It's interesting because my experience is not that people aren't aware of it. My experience, quite frankly, is people don't always feel safe to talk about it.
That's very good. Tell us about that.
My experience is that when people are in spaces where they don't feel like they're going to be judged, or they don't feel like it's going to be connected to some repercussion, whether that's in their organization or even that's in their family, they're willing to be a lot more honest about where they are. And in my experience, a lot of people are renegotiating. They are recreating. They are rethinking. They are on pivot number 27 over the last 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. And I think there is something very quietly happening along the continuum of our human experience, where as much as people are putting on the face of going back, it's different. It feels different. It looks different. It hits different. And that is causing question. That is causing people to not feel as confident in the ways in which they're moving, where maybe traditionally they felt more confident. There was a recent study by an organization called Power to Fly, who supports the workforce, particularly in the context of remote working, but it's a global organization. They interviewed over 250,000 people in the workforce, asking the question, what do you want from companies as you're coming back? And the initial sort of thought was that money was going to be at the top of the list. It was fifth. The first was flexibility. I want to be able to work remotely or hybrid. I want to have some autonomy over my time and over the way that I spend my time. The second, desire. I want to feel like I'm being invested in the environments I'm in, where I'm able to grow new skills. AI is one of many, but there are other technologies and capacities and skills that people are wanting to learn in order to grow professionally. And this is an important distinction because it isn't always about the promotion. It's about our desire as human beings to want to grow and evolve and to want to feel as if we're able to be formidable in our contribution in the times that we find ourselves in. The third big request, connection, community, what we describe as belonging, and the opportunity to feel that they are in some way, shape, or form in environments where they've got authentic, lasting relationships, impactful relationships that contribute to their quality of life and their quality of experience. my experience is if you dig deep enough, if you challenge them, there is something shifting.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that people are acting like it's normal, but not feeling like it's normal. And that becomes a mental health question. It's like, is something wrong with me? I'm doing what I was doing before, but I don't feel right. And that's the question we're asking them to look at. Something's off. You know something's off. You're doing the right things, whatever those are, but something's missing. And as I said about being the great pause, it gave you a chance to question what you didn't have pause to question before. And now you may have gone back and do the things, but now you also got the question that is malingering in the back of your mind and bugging the shit out of you. And you're going, yeah, something's not right, but I can't leave the job. And so I want to talk about that need for safety and structure and all the things that we can, quote, rely on in a world that is materialistic, while battling with this semi-conscious desire to awaken and really be intentional in our ambitions. We're already at the end of part one, and I want to make sure that people can know more about you. We're going to come back for part two of this delicious conversation in just a moment. But Rha, please tell people where they can find out more about you, about your amazing resources, and of course, about the new book.
Thank you. So the book is called Intentional Ambition, and it's available on all of the major retail outlets where you normally purchase your books, or if you like Audible and audiobooks, it's also available on all of those outlets. And then my company is called Move the Crowd, and you can find us at movethecrowd.me, as in move me. And then I am on all of the social platforms at Rha Goddess or / Rha Goddess or / Rha Goddess, depending upon what platform you're choosing.
We will make sure, of course, that all of those links are published in the show notes. So if for some reason you didn't catch them, don't worry. Just scroll down in the show notes. They'll be right there. And we'll make sure that you can have access to all of Rha's resources. We're going to be back for part two of this delicious conversation with Rha Goddess about intentional ambition and why that's so important, particularly today, and how you can move from where you are to where you want to be so that you're living a more fulfilled and more enriched life of ambition. We're going to be back in just one click, so stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.